I'm going to show you guys what racing cars is. That's racing cars. This is the limits, meaning as fast as the car can go. And it's what drivers are constantly trying to chase. When you go too fast, past the limits of the car, you lose traction, you crash, fire, death, burn, oblivion. Here, beneath the limits, it's way worse. You're slow. So you're constantly trying to stay here. This is as fast as a car can go. Simple enough, right? If we make it a little bit thicker, the limits, I can kind of show you what I mean. Limits. Let me explain a couple ways of how drivers approach the limits and problems that they have when they're doing this. So they're trying to get to the limits. A big problem, what a lot of amateurs do, is they approach limits too quickly. See that vertical angle? And when you first get to the limits talk to you. And in the beginning, it starts as like a little whisper. It tests your sanity, really, but that's what you want to react to, is just when you first get to the limits, because then you have enough time to react and start to slow the car down or maintain this speed and not exceed the limits. But because a lot of amateurs, they approach limits too quickly, they don't have time and they just don't have the finesse to even feel, let alone this beginning part. They probably don't react till here. And once you go past limits, that's when the car starts to slide, and up here you're doing something worse than crashing or going slow, you're drifting. What better drivers will do is they'll approach the limits a little bit slower, and then they'll have more time to kind of feel this. They'll spend more time crossing the limit barrier where the tire starts to flex. What's going on, how you feel the limits, like literally, it's so difficult. Like the beginning of the limits here, you have to go in super zen-like. Like you have to be like Gandhi walking on a lawn. You need to feel every blade of grass under your feet. You need to be so connected to the car, you can feel if you drive over a penny or if you drive over a strand of hair. Now that's hard to do in a parking lot, right? But you're going extremely fast. You have G-forces, you have loud noises, you have survival instincts that are all combating, and people on the radio saying or asking you a bunch of useless questions, all combating your ability to feel and concentrate on hearing the whisper of the limits, the seduction of the limits. And what's going on is the tires actually, they start to flex, and then they'll slip a little bit. And like on a street tire, that slip can be felt as like a click, or it can be a lot of times a noise, like the tires will start to screech. But like in a race car and slick tires, you don't really have any of that. It is just a subtle feeling, and you have to be concentrating so hard. You want to feel where each tire is starting to flex and stress and then get that little bit of slip.
All right, so I want to give you guys a tangible example of exactly what I'm talking about. We're on board with a horrible but very good-looking driver in Sebring, Florida. I'm going to show you the same corner twice, one where he makes it successfully, the second time where he pushes it past the limits. And this one, he's right at the limits. This is where he makes it. You can see him working the wheel, but the car's fine, he continues on. Second one looks pretty similar, but pushes just past the limits and completely messes up the corner. We're going to watch them both now at speed. Top one's where he slides. Bottom one is where he makes it. You can see shifting points and everything. It all looks very similar. Really hard to tell. And this is what we're dealing with. It's just the finest margin of a successful corner and having that big slide and messing up your lap. We'll watch it at slower speed here. Shifting points, again, the same. If you look at the little red line on top of the steering wheel, we can kind of see right there is where the turn-in starts. Now, if we look at the right of the screen, right bottom of both screens, it's 87 miles per hour on the one where he slides, 86 where he doesn't. So it's really just a 1 mile per hour difference. The turn-in point's a little bit different as well, but that's the margins that we're dealing with. That's the razor-thin line that the driver is trying to chase. And the top one just goes past that limits a little too quickly, has this big slide, and that lap is completely messed up.
Yeah, there's consequences here, people. This is a wall here. This is another car. It's incredibly difficult to stay and live in the limits. It takes a lot of experience to get familiar and build a relationship with the limits so that you know when you're approaching it, you know how to react when you're there. And it's just an incredible, impossible task. And it's constant because you have an engine, you're chasing after the limits all the time. Where in other activities, you're kind of just, you have these short blips of extreme focus. Here with the engine, you're chasing after this constantly. So you completely become the car. You become a bionic being just chasing after this moving target. So it's impossible to stay in the limits. But what a lot of drivers do is they kind of oscillate. They go past and then they dip below and then they chase back after it again and then they dip below. And, you know, the best drivers, they have like less oscillation, right? And they might go a little bit and they'll go like this. So there's an infinite amount of ways to get into the limits and to exceed the limits and dip below, especially with a million variables going on. That's the other thing. The limits, they move. Tire temperatures change. The track changes. Your car changes. Someone passes you and you're side by side. So now in that corner, that limit is lower. And then all of a sudden your turn shape is different. And then you have to search, you know, you don't have the habits of doing a corner a million times, same braking point. All that is different now when you're side by side with a car. And so you're improvising and chasing after this. And that's why when people pass, that's exciting. The drivers aren't as comfortable. They don't have the muscle memory of where this moving line is. But a lot of what happens too is the driver actually lowers the limits of the car. So a lot of amateurs, but also just a lot of professional race car drivers, they are bringing the limits down. Now, there's a number of ways you can do that. I'll go a little more into depth in some other videos. But one example, big example, is if you are misbalance the car. If you're not using all the forward tires and you're more just using the front tires. So you're using 70% instead of 100% of the car. If you're doing that, you're going to exceed the limits of the car and be at the limits, but at a slower speed. So there's a lot of drivers who feel this. They're at the limits, but they've lowered it because of some little movement that they do. They hang on to the brakes a little too long or not long enough, and their car is misbalanced. So they're feeling this, and that's why they get so frustrated because they're like, I'm doing everything I can. I'm at the limits. Like, how is that guy better than me? But it's probably because they're doing something, for example, maybe balancing the car a little bit better, so their limits are higher. There's also things like being smooth. If you like crank the wheel real quick to turn in fast, that's going to pinch the tire and upset the car a little bit, and that's going to lower the limits of the car. How you react when the car starts to slide. If you overreact, that's going to throw more weight, and that's going to lower the limits of the car. So again, racing is just infinite. This is really what racing is. Infinite. Just chasing. Yes, we're driving around in circles, but we're chasing an impossible thing. Infinitely driving ourselves mad. An intense focus. Running after the limit. So when you see cars out there, if you can empathize with the driver, that's what they're at. Not enough people know, like on a human level, what that's like. Chasing after limits and being there. Because the amount of focus that it takes every cell in your body, every molecule. When I'm driving, my face is like this. I can't even hold my jaw shut. I'm blowing bubbles because all my concentration is trying to search for this thing. And yeah, you leave your body behind. And that's freaking beautiful. And that's what this is about. To try to show and enlighten people about this little line right here. This is racing. I'm fired up! Yay! So I'm gonna be a car. I need 4 wheels, 4 pistons. Yeah. I'm racing. I am racing. You see?